The obvious solution for overwintering your indoor tropical trees is to keep them by a windowsill like this. If you're lucky enough to have a sunroom in your house, that's probably a better option, but I don't have a sunroom. This space right here might be a good place to set my tropical bonsai. There's a nice big ledge here for me to put them, and these windows are facing to the west. So they get a lot of sunlight in the afternoon. Now, the downside of this would be that, again, it's very dry inside a house over the winter unless you have some sort of humidifying system. So that means that the soil of these trees is going to dry out really fast, and it's going to dry out extra fast if it's getting a lot of this direct sunlight in the afternoon. In fact, there's a chance that your trees can really cook sitting next to a window like this. If they have leaves on them, like an evergreen or some other tropical plant, those leaves may actually burn if they're right up against the window and the window is facing the south or the west and getting a lot of direct afternoon sunlight. It may just get too intense for them. So you may want to keep your tree a few inches away from the window, not touching the window, a few inches away from the window ideally, and you're going to want to make sure that they stay watered, extra careful about that. One option for dealing with all that dryness would be to keep your plant in some sort of a water-filled tray. And that water-filled tray could be deep enough that the pot is actually submerged partially in the water. That probably will not cause the tree's roots to rot so long as that water gets evaporated or sucked up within a few hours. The plant should be just fine. And that so if you have to go away for work during the day, you don't have to worry about your tree throughout the day as long as that tray is full of water. When you come home, hopefully the tray will be more or less dried out, but the soil in your pot will be nice and wet. The other limitation of keeping your trees next to a window like this is that, again, if you live in a part of the country where it tends to be really gray in the winter like it is here in Pennsylvania, your trees may not get enough light in order for them to grow and survive. So you may still need to think about creating a greenhouse of some sort in a room of your house with extra supplemental artificial light. If you want to try to make your own greenhouse in some room of your house, like your office or maybe a guest bedroom that you don't use very much, it's very easy and cheap to do. You don't have to buy a pre-made greenhouse like I have in my basement. You can do it using simple, cheap pieces of PVC pipe like this. Connect them together to make basically a rectangle shape, a cube shape, and then cover that with just clear plastic sheeting that you can get at Lowe's or Home Depot. And then there you go. You've got, you just need to put some shelves in there for your plants, and that provides some humidity protection. Then put in some lights of some sort, some fluorescent lights maybe, or some LED bulbs, and there you go. You've got your ready-made greenhouse right there, and you can put it in any room in your house. The best option for you may be an option like this. Now, normally when I talk, I try to recommend things to do with your trees that are pretty simple, cost-efficient, and space-efficient. This one is a little more complicated as an option, but it's actually not that complicated or expensive, and I'll explain what I mean. So where I'm standing right now is inside a greenhouse that I built in the basement of my house. So this greenhouse is not all that complicated or expensive. If you get onto Amazon, you can find similar design greenhouses that maybe go for $100, $150, maybe $200, but probably less. And this is about 9 feet by 6 feet, I think. Not positive about that. but that's about the size of it. And it extends up to about 7 feet. So I have a variety of lights here, and this is a good example of what you can do if you want to, but you don't have to do it this way. So if you can see in the back, I've got a bank of fluorescent bulbs, and that bank of fluorescent bulbs has specific grow lights in them that are designed to have a nice combination of wavelengths that plants respond to well. I also have over here, I have a bank of LED bulbs. That's a more sophisticated system. It puts out more light. It's also more expensive than the fluorescent bank. Fluorescent lights are great in the sense that they are cost effective and they don't produce a lot of heat. They don't cost a lot of electricity, they don't produce a lot of heat, but they also don't produce a ton of light, and that's the downside. They're not terribly bright. So you need a lot of them in order to give your indoor tree the light that it probably expects. LED lights are very bright and very space efficient, so they take up a very small amount of space, but and they also don't use up as much electricity as some other bulbs, but they are relatively expensive systems. Finally, I've got this bulb here. This is a metal halide bulb that I've got in there. Metal halide is a kind of high intensity discharge light. You may decide to sort of mix and match like I've done here with different kinds of bulbs in order to try to fully accommodate the range of light wavelengths that your trees may want. So in addition to the lights that I have set up in here, I also have some tables set up where I will be putting my plants over the winter, and you can see that this is a nice, efficient use of space. I can put plants all along the sides, on the bottom. I could hang some from the top maybe. I set up this set of shelves here to add some more space here, make a more efficient use of space for trees. And the last thing that I've added here is a hose. This is a special drip hose, so the material is rather porous, and what happens is that as water goes through it, the water comes up sort of either drips or sprays in a mist all around the hose. And this is the first year I'm going to try this system, and I want to see how it works. My hope is that it will help to keep the plants wet and keep the air in here humid, because that's the other problem that you're going to have to figure out a way to deal with, is the dryness of your house inside. Humidity in a house over the winter usually gets down to maybe 20-25%. And that's really dry. The soil of your trees is going to dry out real fast, and so you have to supplement that by watering them frequently. And if you have really tropical stuff like orchids, those are plants that will expect to have a high level of humidity, not just be wet, but have the air be really humid. And that's hard to do in an indoor house. So having a greenhouse like this creates an enclosed space where you can try and control the inside climate a little bit better. If you notice, I have added mylar sheeting to the sides of the greenhouse here, and that is to try to increase some light reflectivity so that not all of the light that's produced by the light bulbs just dissipates out the sides of the greenhouse, but actually bounces back and increases the amount of light inside here. It also helps to insulate this space a little more so that it stays warmer through the winter. So this is my overwintering space for all of my tropicals and any indoor plants that I have. And you might be worried about the cost of a setup like this. And yes, this is not super cheap. Everything together here probably cost me, I don't know, maybe $500, something like that, which isn't terribly expensive. This is not nearly as expensive as building a greenhouse in your backyard and finding a way to heat it, which could cost you thousands of dollars over the winter. One last point about overwintering before we go. If you have outdoor trees that you keep in, say, a stairwell, one of the things you want to make sure that you do is water them occasionally. It may be easy to forget about them because you may not see them most of the winter, but what can happen is that the soil will still dry out, and even though those trees don't really need sunlight over the winter, they do need water still. So every so often, every few weeks, or maybe less, check the soil, see how dry it is. They're not going to dry out as quickly as they would if they were indoors because they're in a dark, cold place. So the soil is going to be pretty slow drying. But if it's getting dry, make sure you water them. But don't water them right before you expect temperatures to drop well below freezing if you're keeping them in a cold place like that, because sub-zero temperatures may cause that water that you just put in the pot to freeze, expand, and kill the roots of your tree. So if you expect a really cold snap, then make sure that the soil is only damp, or rather dry, and not soaking with water. All right, hope this helps you keep your plants alive over the winter. If you have any questions, let me know.